Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Tuesday, November 16th, and a little bit of blood in the streets last night as we retested 60K, dragged the entire market down with it. Plenty to talk about today as we saw some liquidations as well. I want to dive into ETH. We didn't really talk about ETH too much yesterday, but I think it's worth a look today. But yeah, CJ, some exciting price action last night. Unfortunately, it was to the downside. How are you doing today, though?
Yeah, really once we put into that close and made that macro kind of lower high, nobody really wanted to step in and buy. And you had pointed out to me earlier before the show that we actually saw a lot of on-chain activity, the largest, in fact, from China. Was that correct? Or just
Yeah.
in general?
Yeah, we
So
saw lots of whale activity from that region, and it lines up with the time frame. We saw that selling as well. So
interesting, yeah. But ever since we ran down to about 58 to 59K, buyers really stepped up below 60, and we're just over 61K right now after a pretty tremendous liquidation. Highest, in fact, that we've had since last October, near kind of one of our local bottoms. So a lot to dive into and explore today based on last night's price action. I mean, also the Bitcoin related equities, Mara, full on capitulation, I think, in my opinion. I mean, for a stock like that to be down 24%, obviously they had the dilution as well, and it was kind of bad timing. But still, it was, I don't know if I called that. I don't know. Anyways, it's really interesting. And I mean, a lot of panic selling. So perhaps we have some opportunities to accumulate here, like the larger term and longer term holders. But I'm excited to get into it and discuss, Monty.
I'm excited as well, CJ. And yeah, I just want to, before we dive into the charts, ultimately, nothing has changed in my perspective for end of year outlook. I think there will be more events like this one that occur during our, climb to ultimately whatever our local top will be at the end of the year. I think that we'll see, a few more events like this where we see some strong pullbacks, liquidation events. Miners get hit hard. So, I think that once again, this market just proves why it's so important to be nimble. But like you said, CJ, I think we're getting an interesting opportunity to kind of accumulate here before this, end of year hurrah. So let's dive into the charts and take a look at what we're seeing here.
It also should be humbling too, just because of the volatility in the market. If you're used to up only markets like the stock market, we can't help you when a move like this occurs because they occur so rapidly, and the liquidations can happen, very quickly throughout the Asian session in, little under 30 minutes or in an hour. But overall, I do think, things just got a little overheated, right? We had Plan B coming out with the 98K by end of November prediction, as well as, 135K by the end of this December. I think it's pretty safe to say that we don't hit those levels, just because of the decrease in volatility to the upside that Bitcoin has experienced in its most recent cycles. Doesn't mean we can't get there throughout Q1 of 2022, but I think it's a little overly ambitious or a little bit too bullish to say that we're going to 98K by the end of November at this point, in my opinion, with the recent downside price action that we've seen. First, let's start with the weekly chart, because although this week still has 5 days before it closes, pretty bearish candle. Nice to find that we're finding support, but we may have to enter a period of consolidation in which we take some time here to rebuild the trend. Markets have to go down before they go up in many cases, similar to how we did here previously after that most recent run. So really, there's probably two scenarios that I want to highlight. And I guess I'll start with the most negative just to get it out of the way. And ultimately, that would be what many of the bears are looking at if we lose this 58 level, would be a more macro higher low at our previous resistance point, which is now flipped to presumably new support. And that would be 53K. Now, I'm not saying that we go there. Personally, I don't think we will go there. I just want to put it on the board as a potential situation for the bearish case if we lose these moving averages and these support levels, because liquidations can happen quickly, but that would not mean that we were in a bear market by any means. That might actually be quite constructive for the overall macro trend and give longer term holders and whales a longer instance to accumulate. But still, that being said, the reason why I don't think that's the likely situation as of today is because we're actually seeing some really nice supply absorption, similar to how we saw it in our most recent liquidation, kind of in late October. So in that period of time, each time you get those wicks that buyers are very enthusiastic to buy up, typically it's a nice sign for bullish price action, or at least kind of neutral consolidation to take place. Now, something that we had talked about and something that I had been kind of alluding to and pointing at was Wyckoff accumulation schematics. And, this tweet was from like November 10th. And it's just, I wanted to highlight a couple different scenarios of what could happen. This was the first bullish scenario that we were talking about that I think has been negated now since we've lost that like 63, 64K support level. Now, since we've tested support at 63, that kind of puts us into what I like to call phase C, or that final test of support before a potential spring. Now, let's be very specific. We do not have to get this spring. Like I said, the bears, if if the trend dictates, we could get pushed down to potential lower levels. But if we see a spring like this, and we reach a price level, that rivals previous support levels, I think that will give us a really nice indication to say, okay, I think that was one of the final tests of support of phase C, and we're probably heading to test higher levels for another bullish consolidation and potential push to new highs. So if we kind of look at where we're at now and try to map that out based on the 4-hour time frame, we have wicked down to this level and bounced from support. So now I'm just kind of looking for consolidation. And if we see a bounce right like that, I will really look to get a lot more long in many positions. But as of now, I want to wait on the sidelines and just test to see if we see any more bearish price action. But I have to say, the fact that we're actually holding this 20 SMMA and this 58K support level, it's not horrible in the interim. But if we look at the overall liquidation numbers and what we've seen in Bitcoin, this is the most liquidations that we've had since September, near a price level of about 43,000. So interesting to note there. But Monty, I'm interested to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, thank you, CJ. Like you said, you laid out some really interesting scenarios there. There are a couple different scenarios. I've seen the bears on Twitter talking about exactly that, price dipping below 58K, and perhaps this, cycle not going to those levels that people like Plan B or even analysts like ourselves have kind of predicted for end of year. But I think if we look at some on-chain metrics, even still during this, relative pullback, they're telling us that we still have higher to go. And, yesterday we were talking about how we saw some whales starting to distribute, and you were hesitant to call it bull market distribution. Well, Glassnode, I think, came up with a nice term for what we're seeing now. Instead of bull market distribution, just some modest spending. And I think that this chart is a great instance of, how we're nowhere near what we typically see during bull markets in terms of, whale distribution or long-term holder distribution. Essentially what this chart is just whenever we see these spikes, that is old coins being moved that haven't been moved in a long time. So the longer they haven't been moved, the more effect they have in this chart. So as you can see, when we start to see these sort of bull markets like this, we see very large levels of distribution. Nothing, is being seen like that quite yet. We're still just in this modest spending period. And I think that's, kind of indicative of where we're at in this market cycle. And if you look at sort of the timing of a bull market distribution, it typically lasts about, 5 to 6 months. So, that's why I think perhaps it is worth reevaluating perhaps the timing of this market cycle. We've been talking about uh, end of this year as perhaps coinciding with the top, but based on what we're seeing now from the speed at which we're seeing these long-term holders distribute, it kind of implies that we may see this market kind of extend into the later months in 2022, perhaps even as late as March. So interesting stuff here on chain, and it's telling us that, although we are getting some pullbacks here, it is really just the beginning. And if you look at what we saw during this period here, we saw some pretty significant pullbacks all throughout this time, and those were all, coincided with some large amounts of distribution. And one other chart I wanted to reference from Glassnode just quickly was the relative or total realized profit and loss. And this is a really important chart because, CJ, you talked about supply absorption. And this right here, essentially what this boils down to is this is how much money needs to come into the space in order for these realized profits and losses to be absorbed. So we've been seeing over the last 48 hours or so about $2.14 billion per day in total realized profits and losses. This was before last night's capitulation event. But essentially what this comes down to is, as long as we have this much capital flowing in, it will continue to absorb the supply when we retest those lower levels, like CJ mentioned. So, historically, we have seen in the month of November, we have seen inflows outpace these typical realized profits and losses, and that has allowed us to continue to climb higher. So I think that is worth noting. And when we see these sort of metrics, it's great to look at for that sort of supply absorption that CJ was just talking about. And one last thing I wanted to reference was with Ethereum. Now, ETH has been trending very strong with Bitcoin, especially when we see these sort of down moves. And like Bitcoin, ETH was hit hard with liquidations last night. And if we look at what that means for ETH, during the last few months or so, we've seen a few different liquidation events, and those events have coincided with ideal times to accumulate. As you can see here, in October, we had a few liquidation events, both of which coincided with a sort of local bottom at which supply was absorbed, and we ultimately continued to climb higher. So I think that, we're definitely seeing something potentially similar here, retesting a critical level at the 20-period smooth moving average. We're seeing that supply absorption occur right below that 4250 level that coincides with this smooth moving average. And also, historically, if we look at what liquidation events mean during bull markets, they typically are followed by ideal times to accumulate or enter even short-term long trades. So I think that any asset today that's coming down and retesting this moving average during a trending market like this is worth a look, because typically, this 20-period moving average holds up very well as support or resistance during trending markets, and I anticipate that to be the case here. So, we're coming back down to earth a little bit. We got a little bit overextended, but that's okay because these levels are holding, and I think that means we're going to continue to ultimately climb higher here. So, talked for a bit there, but I'll pass it back to you, CJ.
Yeah, thank you for that, Monty. We're going to be doing a deep dive into a lot of different assets for our Doge of the day for our members only, just shortly after this. But some bit of news from our friends over at Voyager that I do want to share. And I was really excited when I saw this morning. I instantly registered for the pre-registration. Voyager debit cards. So being able to actually spend USDC in your Voyager account through MasterCard with this Voyager debit. So really cool stuff. I really dig the design, and I'm looking forward to getting one of these. So basically, Voyager will pretty much be my bank at this point. Sorry, Chase.
But not actually, sorry, because they don't give me anywhere near 12% interest on anything. So, but yeah, excited about that. I might actually start breaking out the card when the check comes to the table, earn a little bit of crypto back there. But yeah, like you said, CJ, we'll be taking a look at some potential doges of the day. A little bit here today. Also, tomorrow we'll be doing a members only webinar. This is a time when we, answer your questions, any assets you guys want us to take a look at. We take a look at, we just go over the market as well. We would love to have you guys there. Always ask some great questions, so definitely come over there and check that out. If you want to check that out, head over to marketrebellion.com/try crypto. Oh, and Carl, I see your question. How do you register for the Voyager card? Just open up the app. There should be a new little icon at the bottom. It just says debit card. Click on that. Just click register, and you're good to go. So definitely head over there and check that out. And thank you on that note to Voyager for sponsoring this show. Head over there, get registered for that new debit card. Definitely very excited about that. And you can trade 60 plus assets commission free, earn 12% on assets like DOT, 9% on assets like USDC. So definitely head over there and check them out. And if you do, use code REBEL25 when you sign up. But that's all we got for today. CJ, any parting words for our audience here?
Yeah, I know last night was painful a little bit if you were in any long positions, but in hindsight, when we see these liquidations reach these levels, in hindsight and in many past cases, they've actually been buying opportunities, even if they don't immediately rebound and they take, say 2 to 3 weeks for a bearish neutral consolidation. So, this may be an opportunity to accumulate. A lot of assets are off their highs quite a bit. I still think that we're in a very solid bull market. I just think that the 98K, prediction, and I just think we got a little over ahead of ourselves based on stock to flow. But things I think are interesting now that we're bouncing, and we're going to be doing a more in-depth dive in Doge of the Day here. But thank you guys all for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day in the world wherever you are. But that's all I got. Thank you.
Take care.